My phone buzzed against the polished mahogany on my desk, a soft, insistent vibration. I didn't need to look. I knew it was her, the third one this week. I swiped the notification away. The screen went dark, reflecting the tired lines around my own eyes back at me. Just another message from Mom. It could wait. It always could wait. The thing about New York is it never stops. It's a city built on the promise of next quarter, next deal, next big thing. I was a financial analyst, a good one. I lived in a high-rise with a view that cost more than my dad's entire old house. I wore suits that were tailored just for me. I was successful. I had made it. And I was so lonely. My mom, Nancy, she never understood the pace. She lived in a quiet suburb in Ohio, in the same house I grew up in. Her world was slower. It was measured in seasons, not fiscal quarters. It was baking cookies and worrying if I was wearing a coat. Her texts were like little echoes from that other world. They'd pop up in the middle of my chaos. Buzz. Hi, honey, made your favorite cookies again. Cookies. I was in a meeting, presenting a merger proposal to a room full of stone-faced executives. I remember the feeling of my phone in my pocket, a tiny, warm weight, a distraction. I silenced it. The cookies would be stale by now anyway. Buzz. It's chilly here. Don't forget your coat. I read that one while hailing a cab in a downpour, my own coat already soaked through. I felt a flash of irritation. I'm a 31-year-old man, Mom. I know when I'm cold. I didn't reply. The messages piled up, a digital monument to my neglect. I'd see the list of unread text from Mom and feel a heavy weight in my stomach. But then my own phone would ring, my boss, a client, and that weight would be pushed down, buried under something more urgent. I told myself the same story over and over. I'd call her after this meeting. I'd visit after I closed this deal. I'd make it up to her after the next promotion. The promises were empty, and I think we both knew it. They were just words I used to quiet the guilt for another day. Then, one night, it changed. I was alone in my apartment. The city lights twinkled outside my window, a million other lives happening without me. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone, through emails and news feeds, when my thumb stopped. I was in my message thread with Mom. I hadn't opened it in months. I started scrolling up. Dozens of messages, all from her, all unread. Cheerful updates about the neighbor's dog, questions about my health, pictures of her garden. Each one was a tiny stab. I kept scrolling, back, through a year of my mother's life that I had completely ignored. And then I saw it. Her last text, sent just a few days ago. The words were simple. I'm proud of you, even if you're too busy to talk to me. It didn't sound angry. It sounded resigned, final, like she was letting me go. The guilt didn't just rise this time. It erupted. It was a hot, sharp wave that choked me. My fancy apartment, my view, my expensive suits, it all felt like ash. What was the point of any of it if the one person who always believed in me thought I was too busy for her? My hands were shaking. I couldn't breathe right. This couldn't wait, not for another second. I tapped her name at the top of the screen. I pressed call. It rang, once, twice. I rehearsed what I would say in my head. Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been a jerk. I'm coming to visit, this weekend, I promise. The ringing stopped. Someone picked up. But it wasn't her. It was a man's voice, calm, professional, completely out of place. Mr. Thompson? I was so confused. I pulled the phone away from my ear to check the number. It was hers. Yes, who is this? This is Richard Evans, your mother's attorney. I've been trying to reach you. The world didn't just slow down. It stopped. The air left my lungs. My apartment, the city lights, the hum of the refrigerator, it all just melted into a dizzy and silent blur. My heart wasn't beating. It was slamming against my ribs, a wild, trapped animal. Her lawyer. Why was her lawyer answering her phone? What? I managed to choke out. The word was a dry, broken thing. His voice was soft, careful, like he was handling something fragile. There's something your mother left for you. I think you'll want to come in person. He said more, I think. Something about an address, but I didn't hear it. The phone slipped from my hand. It hit the floor with a dull plastic crack. The screen went black. I just stood there, in the middle of my perfect, lonely life, staring at the broken phone on the floor. The silence in the room was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I keep replaying that last text in my head. I'm proud of you. She was proud of me, and I was too busy to even read her messages. I was too busy to hear her voice one last time. The weight of that is crushing me. I don't even know what to do next. I just stand here. Eu fico imaginando até onde essa história pode chegar. Comenta aqui de que cidade você está me ouvindo só para eu saber que não estou sozinha. I didn't move for what felt like hours. I just stood there, in the middle of my living room, staring at the black screen of my phone on the floor. The lawyer's words kept echoing in my head. Your mother's attorney. Something she left for you. Each repetition felt like a physical blow. My knees finally gave out. I sank onto my expensive leather couch, but I couldn't feel the softness. Everything felt numb and distant, like I was watching someone else's life through a thick pane of glass. My breathing came in shallow, ragged bursts. I kept thinking about her last text. I'm proud of you. She was proud of me, and I was too busy to even read her messages. I was too busy to hear her voice one last time. The weight of that is crushing me. I don't even know what to do next. I just stand here. I fico imaginando até onde essa história pode chegar. Comenta aqui de que cidade você está me ouvindo só para eu saber que não estou sozinha. I didn't move for what felt like hours. I just stood there in the middle of my living room, staring at the black screen of my phone on the floor. The lawyer's words kept echoing in my head. Your mother's attorney. Something she left for you. Each repetition felt like a physical blow. My knees finally gave out. I sank onto my expensive leather couch, but I couldn't feel the softness. Everything felt numb and distant, like I was watching someone else's life through a thick pane of glass. My breathing came in shallow, ragged bursts. I kept thinking about her last text. I'm proud of you, even if you're too busy to talk to me. She knew. She knew I was ignoring her, and she still said she was proud. I looked around my apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed the glittering Manhattan skyline. I used to look at that view and feel powerful, successful. Now it just looked cold and empty. Every expensive thing in this room suddenly felt meaningless. The abstract art on the walls, the Italian furniture, the smart home system that controlled everything with a voice command, none of it mattered. None of it could fix this. I had to pick up my phone. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, just like my perfect life. I pressed the power button, holding my breath. For a terrible moment, I thought it wouldn't turn on. Then the Apple logo appeared, and relief washed over me. I needed that number. I needed to call back. My fingers fumbled as I searched for recent calls. There it was, Mom, with a heart emoji next to it. I'd set that up years ago, back when I actually called her regularly. I pressed dial before I could talk myself out of it. It rang once before he picked up. Mr. Thompson? His voice was exactly as I remembered, calm, measured, professional. The kind of voice that delivers bad news for a living. Mr. Evans, I said, my own voice sounding strange and hoarse. The call dropped. I'm sorry. What's happening? Where's my mother? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear papers shuffling. Your mother passed away 3 days ago, Mark. May I call you Mark? The words hit me with physical force. I doubled over, my head in my hands. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. 3 days ago, while I was in meetings, while I was closing deals, while I was ignoring her texts, she was gone. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Nancy spoke of you often. She was very proud of the man you'd become." That just made it worse, so much worse. She was telling people she was proud of me while I couldn't even be bothered to read her messages. "The funeral was yesterday," he said quietly. "We tried to reach you. I left several voicemails." I hadn't checked my voicemail in weeks. Why would I? Everyone texted. Everyone except my mom, who preferred actual phone calls. The calls I never answered. "I need you to come to my office," Mr. Evans said. "There are some things your mother wanted you to have, some instructions." She was very specific. "Where?" I managed to ask. "Where is your office?" "It's here in Columbus, Mark, about an hour from your mother's house." Columbus. I hadn't been back to Ohio in almost 2 years. I'd made excuses every holiday, every birthday. Too busy, too important. Now I had to go back because my mother was gone. I took down the address with shaking hands. We agreed on 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. When I hung up, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever. I walked to my bedroom and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. I didn't think about what to pack. I just moved automatically. Jeans, t-shirts, a sweater, normal clothes for a normal person visiting their mother. Except I wasn't normal, and I wasn't visiting my mother. I was going to meet her lawyer because she was gone. In the back of my closet, I found an old Ohio State sweatshirt my mom had given me years ago. I brought it to my face and inhaled deeply. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, that familiar floral scent that always meant home. I sank to the floor, clutching the sweatshirt to my chest, and finally let myself cry. The sobs racked my body. I cried for all the times I've been too busy. I cried for all the cookies I never tasted. I cried for the coat reminders I'd found annoying. I cried because I'd give anything now to hear her tell me to bundle up one more time. When the tears finally stopped, my face was raw and my eyes were swollen. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The successful financer was gone. In his place was just a scared little boy who wanted his mom. I finished packing and called my boss. I didn't give him details, just said there was a family emergency. He asked if everything was okay. I said no, nothing was okay. Nothing might ever be okay again. The Uber ride to LaGuardia felt surreal. I watched people living their normal lives, going to bars, meeting friends, laughing. How could the world just keep turning when mine had stopped? At the airport, I bought a ticket for the first flight to Columbus. As I waited at the gate, I scrolled through our old text messages. All the ones I'd ignored. All the little pieces of her life she tried to share with me. "The roses are blooming so beautifully this year." I never asked to see pictures. "Mrs. Henderson's cat had kittens. They're so cute." I never replied. "Thinking of you today, honey." I never said I was thinking of her too. Each unread message felt like a betrayal. Each one was a moment I could have connected with her, but chose not to. I had been so focused on building my career, on being important, that I forgot what actually mattered. The flight was bumpy, matching the turbulence inside me. When we landed in Columbus, the familiar Midwestern air felt different, heavier. This wasn't a homecoming. This was a reckoning. I checked into a cheap hotel near the lawyer's office. I couldn't bear the thought of staying at my mom's empty house. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, I lay in the stiff hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the promises I'd broken, all the visits I'd postponed, all the calls I never made. I thought about what the lawyer might tell me tomorrow, what something your mother left for you could possibly be. I finally understood that success isn't about money or titles or fancy apartments.
It's about the people you love knowing they're loved. And by that measure, I was the biggest failure of all. The morning sun felt accusing as it streamed through the cheap hotel curtains. In a few hours, I'd know what my mother wanted to tell me. I'd learn what was so important that her lawyer had to deliver the message, and I was terrified of what I might discover. I didn't sleep at all that night. The hotel room clock glowed 3:17, then 4:42, then 6:05. Each number felt like an accusation. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mom's face. Not how she looked the last time I visited, that was already over 2 years ago, but how she looked when I was a kid, baking cookies in our warm kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, tucking me in at night, humming some old song, waiting at the bus stop with an umbrella when it rained. I kept thinking about the last real conversation we had. It was Christmas, I think, 2 years ago. I'd flown in for just one night because I had critical meetings the next day. She made my favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes. The whole house smelled like home. I spent most of the dinner checking my phone, responding to emails. She kept trying to ask me about my life, about friends, about anything besides work. I gave her short answers. I remember she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Mark," she said softly, "you're here now. Be here." But I wasn't. Not really. My mind was already back in New York, already thinking about the next deal,
The next promotion. I left the next morning before she even woke up. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Sorry, early flight. Talk soon." We never did. Now, sitting in this sterile hotel room, I would have given anything to have that dinner back, to put my phone away, to really look at her and tell her about my life, to ask about her garden, about her book club, about anything. But you don't get those moments back. That's the cruelest part. When 8 a.m. finally rolled around, I got dressed in the same clothes from yesterday. I didn't care how I looked. I went down to the hotel lobby and drank bitter coffee from a styrofoam cup. My hands were still shaking. The lawyer's office was only 10 minutes away, but I left 45 minutes early. I couldn't sit still anymore. I walked around the block 3 times. Columbus had changed since I'd last really looked at it. New buildings, new shops, but the essence was the same. Slower, kinder. People smiled at each other on the street. An old man held a door open for me. This was the world my mother lived in, the world I'd left behind for something shinier and colder. At 9:50, I finally walked into the building. Richard Evans's office was on the 4th floor. The elevator music was some soft, instrumental version of a pop song. It felt wrong. How could there be music when my mother was gone? The reception area was quiet. Wood paneling, comfortable chairs, a water cooler bubbling softly. A kind-looking woman, maybe my mom's age, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "I'm Mark Thompson," I said. My voice cracked. "I have a 10 o'clock with Mr. Evans." Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, Mark, of course. Nancy talked about you all the time." She stood up. "Let me get Richard. Can I get you some water? Coffee?" I shook my head. I couldn't stomach anything. My mouth was dry as dust anyway. She disappeared down a hallway. I stood there, frozen, looking at the artwork on the walls, generic landscapes of Ohio fields. My mom loved those fields. She'd sometimes send me pictures of sunsets over the corn. I never replied to those either. Then a door opened and a man in his late 50s emerged. He wore a simple suit, no tie. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mark," he said, extending his hand, "I'm Richard Evans. Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but gentle. He guided me into his office. It wasn't what I expected, not some cold corporate space. It felt more like a comfortable study. Bookshelves filled with legal volumes, family photos on the desk, a worn leather chair. He gestured for me to sit in the chair opposite his desk. "I want to say again how sorry I am for your loss," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "Your mother was a wonderful woman. She was one of my favorite clients." I just nodded. I couldn't find words. He opened a folder on his desk. Nancy was very organized, very thoughtful. She updated her will about 6 months ago. She wanted to make sure everything was clear. I stared at the folder. My entire life was probably in there, reduced to legal documents. First, he said, the house and its contents are yours. She wanted you to have the home you grew up in. The thought of going through that house, room by room, made me feel sick. All those memories I'd been running from. There are some specific bequests, he continued. Small amounts to her friends, to her church, to the local animal shelter. She loved that shelter. Of course she did. She was always bringing home stray cats when I was a kid. I'd forgotten that. And then, he said, his voice changing slightly, becoming more deliberate, there's this. He slid a simple, business-sized envelope across the desk. It had my name on it in my mother's familiar handwriting. Seeing her writing, the same writing that had addressed birthday cards I often forgot to open, made my throat tighten. She wrote this for you about 2 months ago, Richard said quietly. She asked me to give it to you personally. She said it was the most important part. I stared at the envelope. My hands were trembling so badly I didn't think I could open it. Take your time, he said gently. I'll give you some privacy. He stood up and left the office, closing the door softly behind him. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. I turned it over. It wasn't sealed. I took a deep, shaky breath and pulled out a single sheet of paper.
It was her stationery, the pale blue kind she always used for proper letters. I started to read. My dearest Mark, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if Richard gave this to you, it means you finally called back. I told him you would, eventually. A mother always knows her son. First, I want you to know I'm not angry. I was sad sometimes, yes. I missed you terribly, but I was never angry. I understood that you were building your life. I just wished you had left a little room in it for me. I've been sick for a while, honey. The doctors found the cancer 8 months ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to be another item on your to-do list. I didn't want your visits to feel like obligations. I kept sending those texts because I wanted you to know I was thinking of you every single day, even when you didn't answer, especially when you didn't answer. I needed you to know that someone in this world was always in your corner. The cookies were real, by the way. I froze them. There are 6 containers in the freezer, all labeled with dates. I kept hoping you'd come home and I could warm them up for you. I'm proud of you, Mark, not because of your job or your apartment in New York. I'm proud of the man you are. The kind boy who helped neighbors carry groceries. The teenager who volunteered at the food bank. The young man who called his mom every Sunday. I know that man is still in there. The house is yours. Do with it what you want. But before you decide, I want you to stay there for 1 week. Just 1 week. Walk through the rooms. Look at the photos. Remember who you were before you became so busy being important. I love you more than anything in this world. I always have. I always will. Mom. I don't know how long I sat there, holding that letter. The paper was damp with my tears. She knew. She knew she was dying, and she never guilted me. She never demanded. She just kept loving me. She kept baking cookies I would never eat. Richard came back in quietly. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a box of tissues and waited. She knew, I finally whispered. She knew she was sick, and I wasn't here. Mark, he said gently, she didn't want you here out of duty. She wanted you here because you wanted to be. But I did want to be, I said, the truth crashing over me. I just kept putting it off. I thought there would be more time. He nodded. We all think that, until there isn't. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I held it like it was the most precious thing I'd ever owned, because it was. I have the keys to the house, Richard said. Whenever you're ready. I took a deep breath. I'm ready now. The drive to my childhood home was only 20 minutes, but it felt like traveling through time. Every street corner brought back a memory. The park where I learned to ride a bike. the library where she took me every Saturday, the ice cream shop where we'd get cones on hot summer days. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. The same blue shutters, the same welcome mat, the same rose bushes she loved so much. Everything was the same, except everything was different. I sat in the car for a long time, just looking. This was the place I'd been too busy to visit. This was the place where my mom lived alone, waiting for a call that rarely came. Finally, I got out. My legs felt weak. The key felt heavy in my hand. I walked up the familiar path to the front door. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The door opened with the same soft creak it always had. And I stepped inside, back into the home I'd left behind, back to all the memories I tried to outrun, back to face everything I'd been avoiding for years. The house smelled like her, that familiar mix of lemon cleaner and something floral. It smelled like my childhood. It smelled like love. I stood in the doorway, not sure if I could go further, not sure what I would find in these rooms full of a life I'd missed, not sure who I would find when I finally faced myself in the mirrors of my childhood home.
What do you think I found waiting for me in that house? What would you be most afraid to discover in your own childhood home after being away for so long? The silence in the house was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a presence, a heavy, waiting quiet that seemed to absorb the noise of the outside world. I stood there in the entryway, the door still open behind me, and just breathed it in. That smell, lemon pledge in her perfume, the one she'd worn forever. It was faint, but it was there. It wrapped around me like a ghost. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. The living room was exactly as I remembered it. The same floral sofa, a little more worn now. The same coffee table with the stack of books she was always reading. A half-finished crossword puzzle sat next to a pen. She always did them in pen. She said pencil was for people who weren't committed. A throw blanket was folded neatly over the back of the armchair. Her armchair. I took a step forward, my shoes too loud on the hardwood floor. I felt like an intruder. This was her space, her life, and I had been a stranger to it. I walked slowly into the living room. My eyes scanned the photos on the mantelpiece. They were a timeline of my life and of her pride. Me as a gap-toothed second grader, my high school graduation, her arm tight around my waist. My college graduation, her beaming. Then, nothing. The timeline stopped. The most recent photo was from over 5 years ago. There was a space where a new one should have been. A space I never filled. I ran my fingers over the top of the television. No dust. She kept a clean house. She always had. I could see her, in my mind, moving through these rooms with a feather duster, humming. I moved toward the kitchen. My heart was pounding. This was the room I was most afraid of. This was where she baked the cookies. The kitchen was spotless. The counters were clear. The sink was dry. It looked like a showroom, not a home. It looked like no one had lived here at all. And that was worse. I opened the refrigerator. A few condiments, a half-gallon of milk, long expired, a stick of butter. It was the refrigerator of someone who lived alone, someone who didn't expect company. Then I saw it. Taped to the freezer door was a note in her handwriting, Mark's Cookies, with an arrow pointing down. My hand started to shake again. I pulled the freezer door open. It was mostly empty, a few frozen dinners, a bag of peas, and on the bottom shelf, stacked neatly, were 6 plastic containers. Each one had a piece of masking tape on it with a date written in her neat script. The dates went back months. The most recent one was from just 3 weeks ago. I reached in and pulled out the container with the oldest date. The plastic was cold against my skin. I carried it to the kitchen table, my movements slow and deliberate. I set it down and just stared at it. These were the cookies, the ones from the texts. She really had made them. Every time, she'd baked them, packed them up, labeled them, and put them in the freezer, waiting for a visit that never happened.
I pried the lid off. Inside, nestled in wax paper, were chocolate chip cookies. They looked perfect. A little frost had gathered on them. I picked one up. It was frozen solid. A rock. A monument to all my broken promises. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, holding this frozen cookie in this silent, perfect kitchen. I thought about her in here, alone, measuring the flour, cracking the eggs, thinking of me, hoping. And then, when I didn't come, carefully sealing them away, preserving the hope. I put the cookie back in the container and closed the lid. I couldn't, not yet. I walked out of the kitchen and down the short hallway to her bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. This room felt more personal, more private. Her bed was made, the quilt smoothed perfectly. A book was on her nightstand, a romance novel with a bookmark about halfway through. She wouldn't get to finish it. On the dresser was her jewelry box and a few framed photos. One of her and my dad from before he died. They looked so young, so happy. I sat down on the edge of her bed. The mattress sighed softly.
I could see the slight indentation on the pillow where her head had rested. I picked up the book. I ran my thumb over the cover. This was her life. Quiet, simple, and full of love that she poured into texts and frozen cookies, hoping some of it would stick. I felt a crushing weight on my chest. It was the weight of all the time I'd wasted, all the love I'd taken for granted. I had been chasing something I thought was important, while the most important thing was right here, in this house, waiting. And now it was gone. The worst part wasn't the sadness. It was the regret. It was knowing that I could have changed this. A phone call, a weekend visit. It would have meant the world to her, and I had treated it like a chore. I looked around her room, at the quiet evidence of her life, and I knew I had failed the one person who never failed me. What would you do if you walked into a room and saw the life someone lived without you? What would it take for you to finally pick up the phone before it's too late? I walked out of her bedroom, the ghost of her presence clinging to me. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. I stopped outside the door that had been my room. My hand hovered over the knob. I hadn't been inside in years, not since that last rushed visit when I'd grabbed some old boxes and made excuses about an early flight. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd left it at 18. The same blue walls, the same worn desk where I'd studied for SATs, the same twin bed with the baseball-themed comforter. It was a museum dedicated to a boy who no longer existed, a boy who had time for his mother. My high school trophies stood on the bookshelf, debate team, math league, student council, all those achievements that felt so important back then, all stepping stones to getting out of this town, away from this life, away from her. I sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked the same way they always had. On the nightstand was a photo of me and Mom at my college orientation. Her arm was around me, her smile so wide it reached her eyes. I remembered that day. She'd driven me up to campus, helped me unpack, then cry it the whole way home, she told me later. But she never let me see her cry. She always wanted me to fly. I opened the top drawer of the nightstand. There, stacked neatly, were all the cards I'd ever sent her. Birthday cards, Mother's Day cards, even a few random ones from my early college days when I still remembered. I picked up the most recent one, from 2 years ago, a generic thinking of you card. I'd signed it quickly between meetings, my signature barely legible. She'd kept it. Of course she'd kept it. Under the cards was a small, worn journal. I recognized it immediately. My senior year of high school, when I thought I was a poet. I opened it to a random page. Terrible, angsty poetry about wanting to escape this town, to be someone important. I cringed reading it. But then
I noticed her handwriting in the margins. Little notes. So proud of my writer. What a beautiful thought. She'd been reading it. She'd been cherishing my terrible teenage poetry. I put the journal back, my hands trembling. Everywhere I looked, I found more evidence of her love, and more evidence of my absence. The closet door was slightly ajar. I stood and pulled it open. My old clothes still hung there, high school jackets, band t-shirts, jeans that would never fit me again. And on the floor, stacked against the back wall, were boxes I didn't recognize. I pulled one out. It was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the bed and opened it. Inside were photo albums, dozens of them. The first one was labeled Mark's First Year in her elegant script. I opened it. Page after page of baby photos. Me sleeping, me eating, me taking my first steps. Every page had little notes in the margins. First smile. He has his father's eyes. So proud when he walked today. I kept going through the albums. My elementary school years, middle school, high school. Then, nothing. The last album ended with my high school graduation. There were empty pages at the back, waiting for photos that never came. The final box was different, smaller, no label. I opened it carefully. Inside were every letter I'd ever written her from college.
Every drawing I'd made as a child, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen together, a pressed flower from our garden, a menu from the diner we used to go to every Sunday after church. She'd kept everything, every little piece of me, every memory we'd made together. And at the very bottom of the box was a small velvet pouch. I untied the strings and poured the contents into my hand. It was a collection of my baby teeth, each one wrapped in tissue paper with a date written on it. Mark's first tooth, 5 years old. Lost at school, so brave. I sat there on my childhood bed, holding my own baby teeth in my hand, and finally broke. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't know existed. I cried for all the time I'd lost, for all the messages I'd ignored, for all the cookies I'd never eaten, for the mother who had loved me so completely while I'd been too busy to love her back. The room grew dark around me. I didn't move. I just sat there, surrounded by the evidence of a love I'd taken for granted. The streetlights came on outside, casting long shadows across the room that had once been mine. I thought about all those meetings I'd prioritized, all those deadlines that seemed so crucial, all the times I'd told myself I'd call her tomorrow. And now there were no more tomorrows left. The house was completely dark now. I should have been afraid, sitting alone in my dead mother's house, but I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even if I was too late. I stood up, my joints stiff from sitting so long. I walked back to the kitchen in the dark. I didn't need lights. My feet remembered the way. I opened the freezer and took out the container of cookies with the most recent date. I preheated the oven like she taught me when I was 8. I placed the frozen cookies on a baking sheet. The smell began to fill the kitchen as they warmed. Chocolate and butter and love. The same smell that had filled this kitchen my entire childhood. When they were warm, I took one. It was perfect. Crispy on the edges, chewy in the middle. Exactly how she always made them. Exactly how I remembered. I ate it sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. And for the first time since I'd gotten that phone call from the lawyer, I didn't feel alone. I could almost feel her there with me, smiling that smile she always had when I enjoyed her cooking. This was what I'd been running from. Not the town, not the house, not even her. I'd been running from this feeling, this overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful love that asked for nothing in return. This love that waited patiently in frozen cookies and carefully preserved memories. The cookie was gone. The crumbs sat on the plate in front of me. I knew what I had to do now. I had to face the rest of this house.
I had to face all the memories I'd been avoiding. I had to finally become the man she always believed I could be. But first, I had to make it through the night in this house full of ghosts. And the hardest ghost to face wasn't hers. It was the ghost of the boy I used to be, the one who had time for the people who loved him. What would you do if you found yourself surrounded by all the love you'd ever taken for granted? How would you begin to make peace with all the time you can never get back? The morning light came through the kitchen window, harsh and real. It lit up the cookie crumbs on the plate. My head ached from crying. My body felt heavy, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. I cleaned up the kitchen. I washed the plate. I put the container of cookies back in the freezer. I didn't seal it shut. It felt like a promise to myself that I'd be back for them. I walked through the quiet house one more time. I wasn't running now. I was just looking. I was remembering. In the living room, I took the most recent photo from the mantel, my college graduation, and I put it in my jacket pocket. I needed a piece of her with me. Then I went to her bedroom. I sat at her dressing table. I opened her jewelry box. It wasn't about money. It was about finding the one thing that was truly her. Under a velvet lining, I found it, her mother's locket. A simple, silver thing. I'd never seen her wear it. It was too fragile, she'd said, for special occasions. I undid the tiny clasp. Inside was a tiny, faded photo of me as a baby on one side. On the other, a photo of my dad. She carried us with her, always. I closed the locket and put the chain over my head. It felt cool against my skin. I knew I couldn't stay in the house forever. The world was still turning outside. My phone, which I'd ignored for a full day, was buzzing with work emails. But they didn't feel important anymore. Nothing felt as important as this. I locked the front door behind me. The sound was final. I got in my car, but I didn't drive back to the city. Not yet. I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been there since the funeral. I had to ask the office for directions to the plot. The man at the desk was kind. He didn't ask why I didn't know where my own mother was buried. I found the stone. It was simple. Nancy Thompson, beloved mother. The dates were too close together. There were no flowers. The ground was bare. I felt a fresh wave of shame. I knelt down, the damp grass soaking through the knee of my pants. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. The words weren't enough. They would never be enough. "I'm so sorry I was late." I told her about the cookies. I told her I ate one. I told her it was perfect. I told her about finding the locket. I promised her I wouldn't forget again. I wouldn't get so lost in my own life that I forgot where I came from. I sat there for a long time, just talking to a stone. It was the longest conversation we'd had in years. When I stood up, my legs were stiff. The sun was higher in the sky. I drove back to the city. The traffic was the same. The skyscrapers were the same. But I was different. I went straight to the office. My assistant looked shocked to see me. "Mr. Thompson, your 10 o'clock has been." "I know," I said. "Reschedule it, all of it, for the rest of the day." I closed my office door. I took out my phone. I didn't look at my emails. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past clients, past colleagues. I found the entry labeled Aunt Carol. I pressed call. It rang twice. "Mark?" Her voice was hesitant, surprised. "Hi, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice a little rough. "Yeah, it's me. I was wondering, are you free for dinner sometime this week?" There was a silence on the other end. Then a soft, "I'd like that, Mark. I'd like that a lot." We made a plan for Friday. I wrote it down in my calendar, in pen. Then I called my buddy from college, the one was always trying to get me to go to his kids' soccer games. I left a voicemail. "Hey man, it's Mark. Tell me when the next game is. I'll be there." One by one, I reached out to the people who were still here, the people I had room for in my life. It didn't fix anything. It didn't bring her back. The ache in my chest was still there, a permanent resident. But it was no longer a screaming, panicked thing. It was a quiet reminder, a compass. My mom's love wasn't in the house. It wasn't in the frozen cookies or the saved teeth.
It was in me. It had always been in me. I just had to stop running long enough to feel it. I finally understood her last text. I'm proud of you, even if you're too busy to talk to me. She wasn't trying to guilt me. She was just stating a fact. Her love wasn't conditional on my attention. It just was. It still is. And now, my life isn't about the next promotion. It's about the next phone call, the next visit, the next batch of cookies I'll bake myself, using her recipe. I finally learned the lesson she was trying to teach me my whole life. The most important thing isn't being successful. It's being present. If this story made you think of someone you love, don't wait. Don't be like me. Pick up the phone. Send the text. Make the time. Before your time runs out. Be better than I was. If you've made it this far with me, thank you for listening. It means more than you know. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Your support helps me keep telling these stories. And maybe, just maybe, it reminds someone else to make that call.